My name is Father Michael Stalla. I am the spiritual advisor for Hope's Garden. Today I'd like to bring a message to the men of hope. So when God gave Adam and Eve the garden, in some way he gave them dominion. Now that's an interesting word. Dominion has a sense of ordering things, that you are now responsible. This belongs to you, but you also have an obligation to care for it. Think about having a farm or something like that. When we have a farm, it doesn't mean that I'm just like a wealthy person with a lot of land, but I have to actually figure out the irrigation and till the soil, get rid of the weeds, really work the land in order for it to be productive. Now, as one of the falls, because of the original sin, this was going to be a difficult task, but not an impossible task. And it required men to go back to their roots, to the roots from the very beginning. The roots of saying, understand the dignity of who you are. That you are called to bring order into that which is disordered. And take the wilderness and make it into a paradise. Now, there is something very satisfying about having your own tomatoes grow and then offering to somebody, I made this tomato, But you couldn't have done it without God providing for you the necessary pieces. God already gave you land. He already gave you tomato seeds. He's given you the water. We simply organized the things. This goes on in many aspects of our lives. If you were to build a house, he gave you the building materials that you were able to develop into bricks or into beams or into whatever you needed so that you could then build the house. Even glass is really a type of sand that is put to a certain temperature. We, in our intelligence, learned these skills and were able to pass on these skills to the next generation and take the world that was already here and kind of sift through it, organizing it in such a way that it became more than it would have on its own, where it changed from paradise into, as it changed from wilderness to paradise. Now, we're always going to have to work on this because this is just an ongoing thing. But I think we've come a long way. If you were then asked to be on a camping trip, there is something about going back to those very basic roots of ours and saying, you know what, I can make it. I can do it. I'm going to walk the trail and work the land and go fishing or whatever you need to do, build a fire, cook your food. That sense of being like directly connected to the organizing of nature, of changing the chaotic wilderness into something usable that is definitely man-made is part of our dignity. We feel very good about doing that. All right. Now, I've made a generalization that all men feel this way, and as if women don't. Of course, it's much more complicated than that. Some men would just prefer not to be that involved in it, but to a certain extent they understand what it means. In the same way, some women might be interested in doing more of the deep down kind of building things, but in general, you'd find that this matches a little bit of a masculine spirituality. Not necessarily a stereotype we want to lock everybody into, but there is an underlying spirituality to it. Now I remember when my grandfather, I must have been very little because he picked me up and he put me on his workbench and he was building a birdhouse and he let me help. Now, I'm not sure what kind of help I was. I probably, held a nail or handed him a tool or did a little painting, but whatever I did, I was probably more in the way than I was actually helping. But nonetheless, it was an honor to build the birdhouse together with the materials and tools and the knowledge he gave me, and then to have my own little 2 cents to add to it. In the end, every time I visited my grandfather, we would look out the kitchen window to see our birdhouse, to see if any birds had decided to nest there. And it was amazing to me when they did, when they accepted our gift, and that itself became a gift of grandfather and grandson. You could see this is really what God is doing. He's providing us with so much, and then we do our feeble best I mean, honestly, God could have done better than any of us, but He allows us to do it because of the dignity of participating in His work, so that in the end result, we look at the house, the building, the family, the food, and say, this is what we were able to do. And we take pride in that. It becomes a gift of ourselves, kind of invested within the physical gifts of our developing the wilderness into paradise. Now, that being said, there are certain characteristics that make men attractive to women, and this would be one of them. You are the kind of person who's able to sift through the chaos of this world and make sense of it and build rather than destroy. And that we're not just passively saying, wow, that's too bad. These things are just a tough way to live. But instead, we actively try to fix and make better and improve. We see ourselves as capable of developing the world around us. First and foremost, this must start in ourselves. To be a man means that we live in an imperfect world. And all of the gifts that our ancestors were able to hand on to us, many of them are very good gifts. Some of them might not be. We end up with little things in there that shouldn't be. We have old prejudices. We have angers. We have bad habits. And we've picked these things up. Some of them we picked up on our own. Some of them were given to us by our environment. And some were just handed on ancestrally. What we need to do then is sift through kind of the wilderness of our hearts, minds, and souls, and to start taking out of it the weeds, the things that shouldn't really be in there, because it's disordered. And just as we physically order the world around us, we have to spiritually order our passions within us. How do we handle anger, lust, laziness? How do we handle insecurities or self-hatred or the hatred of others? What do we do with these emotions? Now, sometimes we just try to ignore it. You know, everybody's got that drawer in the house where they just throw all the junk, and just as long as you don't open that drawer, or maybe for you it's an entire closet, or maybe there's a part of the house where you live and the rest of the house you just whatever happens to it. Yeah, we do that. We do that with our spiritual life too. There are areas that are very presentable and I'd be happy to show to people, but there are other areas that I have completely neglected and I just hope nobody notices, right? But eventually they do, right? Eventually people see it. And then we get all angry. Why don't you just look at the good and ignore the bad? But that's not real helpful. What we need to do is even put into order the disorder of the places of our hearts we don't generally like to talk about. We like to talk about our strengths, not our weaknesses. But to really get in there and start to work through some of these weaknesses, some of these bad habits, boy, that takes courage. But it does kind of reach down to that masculine spirituality, doesn't it? It feels a little bit like, okay, I'm going to go away from the comfort zone and I'm going to go camping into this true wilderness. And this is going to be tough. And maybe I can only do it in short periods of time. But it's really awesome when we do it. When you're able to put into order these things. When you overcome procrastination. When you no longer allow people to manipulate you because of their attractiveness. When you understand that I don't work just for money. That's really quite an accomplishment when we start to overcome those tendencies. And there's a lot more. There's pornography. There's gambling. There's drinking. Boy, anybody who is really on the other side of those kind of addictions, how heroic are they? They're awesome. To be honest, there's still a little bit of fear in them that they're going to slide back. Because we do. That's the kind of the way life goes. You know, if you were to take real good care of your house, guess what? In the next couple of weeks, you're going to have to do it all over again. It's an ongoing keeping things in order. That's normal. The lawn needs to be cut. The trees need to be pruned. And sometimes when we do it once, we say, oh man, I don't want to have to do it again. But we're men. That's our duty. We do it again. And that's the way we have to treat those places in our hearts that perhaps we get it all settled at one point, but then begin to neglect it again. And we're like, I'm getting into my old habits again. Instead of beating ourselves up or hiding it all in the junk closet, we're going to put on that backpack and let's go out. Let's take care of it. So whatever it is that we need to put into order so as to change the wilderness into the paradise, don't be afraid. This is what we're good at. And I think that's a big attraction to the men of this world. I'm not talking about men that are just pushovers, they do whatever anyone else says, but a person who has self-ownership. I don't just try to make everyone else happy. I'm not a people pleaser. I'm a person who takes seriously my own dignity, and I work at it, and I never stop working at it. And I recognize as soon as you have arrived, there's going to be more work tomorrow. But God gave me that dignity. Like Adam before me, I will work the land. And it ain't going to be easy, but it'll be worth it. God bless you all.